What's up everyone? Today we are painting Asim from Zombicide's Green Horde. And I worked really hard to get his colors to be just an awesome color scheme, and I think he turned out great. So I'm really excited to show you how I blended the colors to get this really awesome tan and green mixture that I think just really rocks, and he super pops from the table. He looks good on the game. So I would like to get down to the table and show you how I did him. Alright, so as usual, we are starting with a zenithal highlight of using black primer to prime the entire model, and then doing white primer from a 45 and a top-down angle. I'm using my regular Wargamer Regiment brush and Kalinsky Masterclass brush from Army Painter. And we're going to start with Nocturna Fantasy Pro from Vallejo, the base flesh. Now this is a little bit of a darker flesh tone, and Asim is, I believe, either Arab or Middle Eastern, so he deserves to have a little bit of a tanner tone for skin tone. So I'm starting with base flesh, which is a little browner. He doesn't have too much exposed skin, which finally I'm excited about because I am terrible with skin tones and doing proper shading and highlighting of skin. So I'm really glad that he only has his face and his hands. Unfortunately, we still have the face, which the face is probably the hardest part of all that anyway. So unless I get a character with a mask, it's never going to be perfect. So here is the Vallejo Nocturna Pro Natural Flesh, and I mix in a little bit of the previous color, the base flesh, into this natural flesh, and then that's where I start my highlight. So we want to start with the fingers, and we're going to do the top of the hands, then we're going to do the nose, around the mouth, the eyebrows, and the cheekbones, and then make sure you get both hands just the part that the sun would hit. The easiest thing to do is flip the model up, look directly at the top point of his head, and whatever skin you could see, that's what you want to color with the next highlight, and then just get brighter and brighter and brighter towards the center of that. The face is a little bit harder to do. I'm adding highlight skin here. I'm showing the base flesh, but actually I added it to the mixture of the base and natural flesh. So I didn't go back to base flesh to add the highlight flesh. I just went straight into the mixture. And then that I'm hitting the knuckles and a little bit more the top of the hand, and then of course the points on the face. But like I was saying with the face, even though he's wearing a turban, so his face would be shaded a little bit more, you want to exaggerate it for, you know, artistic sake. If you don't exaggerate the highlights, his face isn't going to look natural. So here's the base flesh, and I'm adding Nocturnal Highlight, which is basically a low light. This is a shadow, or Nocturnal Shadow, I'm sorry. It's a shadow that you're using. And I mixed it with the base flesh, and I'm doing the same thing that you saw in Johannes. I'm outlining the beard, I'm putting it in the eye sockets, I'm getting a little bit on the bottom of the hands. You want to be light on this. You do not want to do it heavy because it's going to come off green looking. But you want to get the bottom of the fingers, the bottom of the hand, and around the neckline of his scarf, his headscarf there. So here's German Gray from Vallejo Model Color, and that is the base color that I am using for his shirt. So he has this grayish shirt on, and he actually is primarily three colors. Other than his skin and the accents, his actual body is three colors. So his entire shirt I'm doing in this dark gray first. And German Gray is a very dark gray. So now I have Mechanicus Standard Gray, which is a medium tone gray, and then Wolf Gray from Vallejo Game Color. And those are much brighter. And so I'm starting with pretty much purely the Mechanicus Standard Gray. And then each time I'm going to come back and I'm going to highlight with a little bit more Wolf Gray mixed in. So I'm starting with pure Mechanicus Standard Gray. Then I'm doing maybe a 75 Mechanicus to 25 Wolf Gray, 50-50, 25-75 the other way. And I don't think I ever go to a pure wolf gray. I'm going to say that I don't, because that would be really bright. Wolf gray is getting towards white. It's starting to lose the gray and getting towards white, especially if you have a really dark background on it. So I think it's better to not go as heavy with the bright colors and keep it toned in the grays. Now you can do whatever you want. If you want him to be really bright, go for it. So you can see here I've gone and highlighted all the flat and the raised areas, and now I'm going back and I'm looking for just the raised areas. So the next color of highlight is more raised and less of the flat. And then the last time it's going to be points. So I'll pick out points of like along the bottom of the shirt there at the bottom below the scabbard. And then some points on the back, on the points of the arm that are facing up. And now we have whole red and game color khaki. I'm really liking this khaki color. It's really awesome. And I'm putting in just a little bit of the whole red to darken the khaki. So it's really about a 90-10 split. But you have to mix it and try to, you know, get what you can out of it. And I'm doing his pads, which he has 2 on his shoulders. He has 1 on his right hip. Then he also has very small ones on his wrist. That look to all be about the same color. So I'm going to just make them all the same color and change how much I highlight. His shoes also seem to be the same color, but I'm doing in a little bit of a different way. So here you can see all the areas that I colored in that mixture. You can see both of his wrists, both of his shoulders, his right hip, and both boots. Now this is where it's going to change a little bit. So I'm using the khaki, and I'm eventually going to mix in some Army Painter Brain Matter Beige. But my first line highlights that I'm doing on the right hip and on the boots is I'm going to be doing pure khaki. Now you can see that I'm drawing sort of a diagonal line on this hip. The reason I'm doing that is if you look at the model again from the top, that is the area that you can see. You actually can't see that back area because it's covered by his arm. So you would guess that that means that that area is probably shadowed. Now I'm dry brushing the khaki onto the shoulder pads. I did the same thing with the wrist guards that I did with that hip side there. And then for the boots, I actually went and painted a lot of it khaki because they seem to be a little bit of a lighter tone. So now after the dry brush, I've added more of the Brain Matter Beige in to get a much lighter color, and I'm going, and it's very watered down. You need to make sure that it comes off of your brush easily. You can always check it on your thumbnail, and if it just comes off really, really easy on the smoothness of your thumbnail, then you know it's going to come off easy on the miniature. So I'm going and I'm highlighting in sort of a upside down triangle. The top of where it meets his shoulder, I did 5 or 6 of the little raised areas. I don't remember exactly how many's on there. Then the next one down I did 4, then 3, then 2, then 1. And then I did the same thing on the other shoulder too. I think that on his left shoulder, because it's up, I did a little bit more. So I did like 6, 6, 5, 5, 4, 4. Because it just made more sense. The other shoulder being sloped down is going to have more of a specific highlight to it. So what I'm doing here is I took the light turquoise from Vallejo Model Color, flat green from Vallejo Model Color, and refractive green from Vallejo Model Color, and I did a 25-25-50. That was what I found to get this color of turquoise-ish green in the right shade of what I wanted for Asim here. So you may hate this color, you may think it doesn't match correctly, but the color I think turns out excellent, especially with that khaki color, that tan. I think it looks so good. So you're coloring his turban, his headscarf, and his bottom skirt that is going all the way around him. And that's why I said those are the 3 main colors. So you have the gray, you have the khaki, and now you have this green. And that's about it for colors for him. So it just comes down to really trying to highlight it properly. Again, I'm using the Brain Matter Beige. You could also use Ivory if you have Vallejo, a model color exclusively. It's just an off-white color. You don't want it to be pure white. It gets too bright too quick. So I'm now doing all the raised areas. So the edge of the skirt, those little raised like emblems on the side of his skirt there. You can see them, the little circles there. They look like they might be like embossed in the fabric. In the artwork, they're not a different color, so it doesn't look like they are maybe metal or something like that. They look like they're actually part of the fabric. So I just went with what the character art showed. So you just want to make sure that you get all of the flat areas and the raised areas, and then I just keep adding more of the bright white. I said not to use bright white. I brighten it with the off-white, is what I meant to say. The Brain Matter Beige. Just keep adding more of it and do more and more highlights. I think that this model really pops with having the darker background and then the brighter highlights, because only having the 3 colors, you can make it look like he has so many more colors just by doing the highlights. And also, we have gray, we have khaki, and then we have turquoise. These are all naturally bright colors. So you can see on the boot, I also did all of the raised areas on the boot with that khaki and off-white mixture. I did his turban with the turquoise and white mixture. Here's P3's Umber. So you just want to make sure you're getting all those raised areas. If you want to consider that he has a 4th color, he has leather. So however you want to do leather, I experimented with a different way of doing leather this time. He also has what looks like a bit of a leather straps underneath his arms. I'm showing you here, but they're too hard to paint in this angle, so I'm just going to do it off camera. And then he also has what looks like a leather guard underneath his skirt. So I painted that with the Umber. And then you want to make sure you get the back too. Don't forget the scabbard in the back. So we're bringing back out the khaki, again, one of my favorite colors now. And I'm using this to highlight. I used to use that raw sienna, but I'm trying to get away from using non-miniature painter paints. The craft paints, they seem to, they're good. They're really good for doing scenery and things like that, and they're a great price. But I don't want to use them so much on my miniatures because you have to treat them differently each time, and I'd rather just be kind of consistent. So I didn't show that I also did his beard in the Umber. His beard. And I'm using the khaki to put some highlights in it. So he's not as old as Johannes, so I didn't want to put in any gray, but I did put in the khaki in there, so he has some light spots and some dark spots, and I think that really makes his beard look great. So one of the things is where you can see here, I'm kind of struggling to put it on there. You need to make sure that your paints are watered enough. That is a clear sign that they're not watered enough if you can't get them off the tip of the brush. So that was Mechanicus Standard Gray, and I'm painting some of the little metal pieces and then hit both blades with this. He doesn't have special weapons in the game, at least he doesn't start with them, so I didn't want to paint him as having them. I use that khaki a little bit to highlight right in the center so you can see that, and I think that looks really, really good from farther away. I need to work on it to try to get it to look really good from up close. There is a difference from that 3-foot standard to up close. I use the whole red, which is the brownish red, and colored in his, I don't know what really to call this. It's like a sash that is hanging down in the front. And then I use flat red to go and do a layer over that. So I did all the raised areas of that, and that really made the red pop in just a quick couple coats. Now I'm using my favorite color, buff, my favorite color to do any strings. So I'm going, and there's some strings on the scabbard in the back, and I am coloring those in the buff. And then here's Ivory. Model color Ivory. You could use the Brain Matter Beige if you have that. And you're not upside down, the model is, don't worry. And you want to paint in the eyeballs. The best way to do this is make sure that the paint is not too wet. This is an important one, to not be too wet or it will run all over. But it needs to be just wet enough so that you don't fight it. And you want to go in and just very lightly move your brush back and forth to get those eyeballs in there. Now I did go back with black and put 2 dots for the actual pupil, but I didn't show that because it's really hard to do on camera and I mess it up more than I get it right. Here is Vallejo Model Colors Gold. This is a metallic paint and I'm painting on, there's 2 pieces on the scabbard there, and then there's 2 pieces on the front dagger scabbard. And then there's also the handle of the dagger that looks gold in the artwork. I didn't want to do non-metallic metal on this guy. I had spent so much time on Johannes. I kind of want to vary it up, and I just wanted to do that kind of quickly. So then after I have already matte varnished the model, I go back and I put on Blood for the Blood Gods from Games Workshop, from Citadel. Do not do this before you matte varnish. If you do, it will dull out and it will just look like red paint. You want it to stay glossy. You could also matte varnish it and then go back with gloss coat and you would be fine. But here he is all completed. One thing that I did add, obviously you see the scenic base on him, which I added on there. But also you see there I put some red dots to look like little gems, and I went back and put some Ard Coat from Citadel on there, which is a glossy varnish. Here he is with his artwork. I think that it came out awesome. It is one of my favorite models that I've done, but please tell me in the comments below what you think about it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I will have another video up in just a couple of days, and I will see you all soon.